Neville Goddard, 1953 lectures, Changing the Feeling of I. For the benefit of those who were not present last Sunday, just let me give you a quick summary of the thought expressed here. We claim that the world was a manifestation of consciousness, that the individual's environment, circumstances, and conditions of life were only the outpicturing of the particular state of consciousness in which that individual abides. Therefore, the individual sees whatever he is by virtue of the state of consciousness from which he views the world. Any attempt to change the outer world before he changes the inner structure of his mind is to labor in vain. Everything happens by order. Those who help or hinder us, whether they know it or not, are the servants of that law, which constantly shapes outward circumstances in harmony with our inner nature. And it's true, this is simply just how the way it works. What we're doing together is discussing this over and over and over, ad infinitum, hopefully not ad nauseum, but we're trying to fill in every crack and crevice so you gain a conscious control of your environment through changing your conscious awareness. That's what we're doing together. We asked you last Sunday to distinguish between the individual identity and the state they occupy. The individual identity is the Son of God. It is that I speak of you. It is that I speak of you or to you or speak of myself. I really mean our imagination. This is permanent. It fuses with the state and believes itself to be the state with which it is fused. But at every moment of time, it is free to choose the state with which it will be identified. And that brings us to today's subject, changing the feeling of I. And I hope I will not get the same reaction that is recorded in the 6th chapter of the Gospel of John. For we are told that when this was given to the world, they all left him, leaving just a handful behind. For when he told them there was no one to change but self, they said, this is a hard teaching. It's a hard thing. Who can hear it? For he said, no man cometh unto me, save I call him. And then it's recorded when he repeated it 3 times, they left him, never again to walk with him. And he turned to the few who remained and asked them, would you go also? And they answered and said, to whom would we go? You have the word of eternal life. In other words, it's so much easier when I can blame another for my misfortune, but now I am told that no man cometh unto me save I call him, that I am the sole architect of my fortunes and misfortunes. It's a difficult saying, and so it's recorded. It's a hard saying. Who can hear it? Who can grasp it? And who will believe it? And so he said, and now I sanctify myself, that they also be sanctified through the truth. For if this is the truth, then there is no one to change, no one to make whole, no one to purify, but self. And so we start with the I. Most of us are totally unaware of the self that we really cherish. We have never taken one good look at the self. So we don't know this self. For the I has neither face, form, nor figure, but it does mold itself into structure by all that it consents to, all that it believes, and few of us know really what we do believe. We have no idea of the unnumbered superstitions and prejudices that go to mold this inner, formless I into a form which is then projected as a man's environment, as the conditions of life. So here, read it carefully. When you go home, no man cometh unto me, save I call him. You didn't choose me, I have chosen you. No man can take away my life, I lay it down myself. There is no power to take from me anything that is part of the inner arrangement of my mind. All that you gave me I have kept, and none is lost save the son of perdition, or the belief in God. And because nothing can be lost but the belief in loss, I will not now assume loss of anything. you have given me that is good. And so I sanctify myself that they be sanctified through the truth. And now, how do we go about changing the I? First of all, we must discover the I. And we do this by an uncritical observation of self. This will reveal a self that will shock you. You will be altogether, I wouldn't say afraid, but ashamed to admit you've ever known such a lowly creature. Let me repeat the sentence. This will reveal a self that will shock you. You will be altogether, I wouldn't say afraid, but ashamed to admit you've ever known such a lowly creature. And had it been God himself who drew near in this despicable form, you would have denied him 1,000 times before a single cock would crow. You couldn't believe that this is the self that you've carried around and protected and excused and justified. Then you start changing this self after, by an uncritical observation, you make the discovery of that self. For the acceptance of self is the essence of the moral problem of the world. It is the epitome of a true outlook on life, for it is the sole cause of everything you observe. Your description of the world is a confession of the self that you do not know. You describe another, you describe society, you describe anything, and your description of the thing you observe reveals to one who knows this law the being that you really are. And let me tell you what, man, once you get here, when you hear people talk, you're just like, oh my. You're like looking at them and all their words are revealing this image. You point one finger away from themselves and 3 fingers back at themselves. And they don't hear one iota of the truth. They don't realize it. They're not aware of his word. So you must first accept that self. When that self is accepted, then you can start to change. It's so much easier to take the virtues of the gospel and apply them as the word of life, to love the enemy, to bless those who curse us, and to feed the hungry. But when man discovers the being to be fed, the being to be clothed, the being to be sheltered, the greatest enemy of all is that self, then he's ashamed, completely ashamed, that is the being, for it was easier to share with another something that I possess, to take an extra coat and give it to another. But when I know the truth, it's not that. I start with the self, having discovered, and start with change of that self. Now, let me tell you a story. A few years ago in this city, I was giving a series of lectures down near the lake. I can't even recall the name of the lake, but it was some Parkview Manor was the place where I spoke. And in that audience was a gentleman who sought an audience before the meeting. And we went across the street into the little park there, and he said to me that he had an insoluble problem. I said, there's no such thing as an insoluble problem. But he said, you do not know my problem. It's not a state of health, I assure you. It's a look at the skin that I wear. I said, what's wrong with it? It looks lovely to me. He said, look at the pigment of my skin. I, by the accident of birth, am now discriminated against. The opportunities for progress in this world are denied me just because of the accident of birth, that I was born a colored man. Opportunities for advancement in every field, neighborhoods that I would like to live in and raise a family, I couldn't move in. Where I would like to open up a business, I couldn't move into that area. Then I told him my own personal experience that I came to this country. Well, I didn't have that problem, but I was a foreigner in the midst of all Americans. I didn't find it difficult, yet as he reminded me, but that's not my problem, Neville. Others have come here speaking with an accent, but they haven't my skin, and I was born an American. Then I told him of an experience of mine in New York City. If I were called upon to name a man that I would consider my teacher, I would call him Abdullah. I studied with that gentleman for 5 years. He had the same color skin, the same pigment as this gentleman. He would never allow anyone to refer to him as a colored man. He was very proud of being a Negro, didn't want any modifications of what God had made him. He turned to me and said, have you ever seen a picture of the Sphinx? I said, yes. He said it embodies the four fixed quarters of the universe. You have the lion, the eagle, the bull, and the man. And here is man that is the head, the crown of that creature called the Sphinx, which still defies man's knowledge to unriddle it, was crowned with a human head. And look carefully at the head, Neville, and you will see whoever modeled that head must have been a Negro. Whoever modeled it had the face of a Negro, and if that still defies man's ability to unravel it, I am very proud that I am a Negro. I have seen scientists, doctors, lawyers, bankers from every walk of life seek an audience with old Abdullah, and everyone who came thought themselves honored to be admitted to his home and receive an interview. If he was ever invited out, and he was always the honored guest. He said, Neville, you must first start with self. Find self. Don't be ashamed ever of the being you are. Discover it and start the changing of that self. Well, I told this gentleman exactly what Abdullah had taught me, that there was no cause outside of the arrangement of his own mind. If he was discriminated against, it was not because of the pigment of his skin, though he showed me signs as large as all outdoors denying him access to a certain area. The sign is there only because in the minds of some men such patterns are formed, and they draw unto themselves what now they would condemn, that there is no power outside the mind of man to do anything to man. And he, by the arrangement of his own mind, by consenting to these restrictions in his cradle, and being conditioned slowly through his youth, walking into manhood, believing himself set upon what had to be set upon, but no man cometh unto me save I call him. So then someone comes to condemn or to praise. They couldn't come unless I call them. Not a man called Neville, but that secret being that is not called Neville. The secret being that is the sum total of all of my beliefs, all of the things that I consent to, that form a pattern of structure. That secret being draws unto itself things in harmony with itself. Well, that man went away and wrestled with himself. He couldn't believe everything I told him, not that night, but last Sunday morning in the lobby, he came forward and we renewed the friendship. He took me next door to show me the fruit of this teaching. He said, Neville, it took me almost 3 years to really overcome that fixed idea that I, by the accident of birth, would be a secondary citizen, but I overcame it. Now here's my office on Wilshire Boulevard. I picked this one not because it was the only one offered. 4 equally wonderful spots were offered me. I took this one because it had greater telephone facilities, but the others were equally good. Now here's my office. Now you couldn't judge my income from this office, lovely as it is. Everything is nice about it. But Neville, this year I will get $250,000. Well, in America, that is still a fabulous sum of money. It would be staggering in any other part of the world, but even in fabulous America, a man to net $250,000 is really up in the very highest of brackets. Don't forget, we're talking about 1953. And that was the man that a few years ago told me the whole vast world was against him by reason of the accident of birth. He knows now he is what he is by virtue of the state of consciousness with which he is identified. And the choice is his to go back to the restrictions of his childhood when he believed the story, or to continue in the freedom that he has found. We know which one he chose. So you and I can be anything in this world we desire to be if we will clearly define our aim in life and constantly occupy that aim. It must be habitual. The concept we hold of self that is noble must not be put on just for a moment and taken off when we leave this church. We feel free here. We feel that we have something in common. That's why we are here. But we are going to wear the noble concept we now hold of self when we go through the door and enter that bus. Or are we going to return to the restrictions that were ours prior to coming here? The choice is ours. And the hardest lesson to learn is that there is no one in this world that can be drawn into your world unless you and you alone call him. So do not do what they did thousands of years ago, for that is the beginning of the session of the great truth. That is the beginning of the secession of the great truth. So we are told they turned away from it, never again to walk with it. And the few who remained didn't like it either. But where would they go if this is the word of eternal truth? Not that it's true for this day and age, but if this is the law of being, and in all the dimensions of my being it holds good, if this is eternally true, then let me learn the lesson now, though I wrestle with myself as he did for 3 years. That's what I'm saying to you. Let me learn the lesson now. You get this lesson now, you stop all other chicanery and tomfoolery, and you focus on this lesson, that you are the creator of your own reality by your imagination. Your imagination is Christ. Your imagination is God. Your imagination is all that is. Your imagination is the power that made you. Get this lesson down now, and all is yours. The entire kingdom is yours. This gentleman took 3 years. I'm at the beginning of my 4th year, so it took me 3 years. Don't count the 30 years preceding. It was Seth material, multiple metaphysical subjects, just like Neville, Ho'oponopono, deep study, deep teaching, deep longevity, practice, fail, over and over and over and over. Don't go the long route. Don't get in line behind me. Learn this lesson now. This is the ultimate lesson. I'm here to tell you, this is the cherry on the sundae. If this is the law of being, and in all the dimensions of my being it holds good, if this is eternally true, then let me learn the lesson now, though I wrestle with myself as he did for 3 years. So the changing of the feeling of I is a selective thing, because unnumbered states are infinite states. But the I is not the state. The I believes itself to be the state when it enters and fuses with it. So he was presented with a state, and without the faculty of discrimination in his youth, he fused with the state and believed these restrictions were true. And it took him 3 years to disentangle the I from these fixed ideas with which he had lived for so many years. Who cares if it takes 3 years? Who cares if it takes 2 years? Who cares if it takes 1 year? Who cares if it takes 5 years? You're here to learn this lesson. You are here to learn this lesson. Don't be confused. Stop what you're doing. Stop the bullshit. Stop the tomfoolery. Stop the chicanery. Focus. No one is coming to the rescue. There is no knight in white shining armor on a white horse. It's shining armor on a white horse. There's no rescue team. There's no Marvel squad. There's no Marvel nothing. It's you. This is all up to you. If you want to call yourself the superhero, it is befitting. You should be called that, because it is true. If you stop and learn this lesson now, then get on with the killing. The killing is figuratively a statement for the fun to be had. There's nothing but massive amounts of fun to be had. Stop and learn the lesson now. Go after yours. Now, you may take only a moment or two, may take your 3 years. I can't tell you how long it's going to take you, but I'll tell you this much. Again, I'm just over the 3-year mark. I'm in my 4th year now. It can be measured by the feelings of naturalness. But I'll tell you this much, Neville's saying, it can be measured by the feelings of naturalness. You can wear a feeling until it's natural. The moment the feeling becomes natural, it will begin to bear fruit within your world. That is a massive shortcut right there from the lips of Neville. Straight shortcut. That's a mic drop moment right there. You can start now from scratch and choose the being you want to be. You aren't going to change the pigment of your skin, but you will find your accent or the pigment of your skin or your so-called racial background will not be a hindrance. For if a man is ever hindered, it can only be the state of consciousness in which he abides that hinders him. Man is freed or constrained by reason of the state of mind in which he persists. If you persist in it, well, then I will say, persist in it. But I warn you, no one cares. And that is an awful blow when a man discovers that no one but himself really cares. That's why I keep repeating, nobody is coming to the rescue. No one's been called. It's not happening. It's up to you to choose your objective and get on with the killing. Choose your objective and move towards it. Simple. So we find ourselves weeping with ourselves in the hope of getting others to weep with us. And what an awful shock when the day arrives we discover no one really ever cared. They will give us some little listening ear for a moment just as they were passing by, but they really didn't care. When we make that discovery, we shake ourselves out of it and boldly appropriate the gift our Father gave us before that the world was. So let me show you the gift. You read your Lord's Prayer possibly daily, but you read it as a prayer from a translation of a translation, which does not reveal the sense of the evangelist. The real translation you will find in Farrer Fenton's work, where in the original it is written in the imperative passive mood, which is like a standing order, a thing to be done absolutely and continuously, so that you can look now upon your universe as one vast interknit machinery where all things happen. There isn't a thing to become. All things are taking place, so it is written in this manner. Thy will must be being done. Thy kingdom must be being restored. It is the only way you could express it if you would express the imperative passive mood. But from the Latin, from which our translation was made, there is no first aorist of the imperative passive mood. So we have it in the way we have it, but it does not reveal the intent of the mysteries. If you will see all things are now, you don't become, you simply select the state you would occupy. Big time! There is no past and there is no future. It is all now. In this one sentence, he sums up all of that idea in one quick sentence. Here it is. Clip this section and repeat it all night if you must. If you will see all things are now, you don't become, you simply select the state you would occupy. Nothing in the past is keeping you in that state. Nothing in the illusion of the future says you have to remain in that state. Nothing. You simply select the state that you would occupy. No one is going to do it for you. You must do it yourself. You will thank yourself later, big time. Occupying it, you seem to become, but it is already a fact. Every aspect of that state in its most minute detail, it's worked out and taking place. You, by occupying the state, seem to go through the action of unfolding that state, but the state is completely finished and taking place. So now you can choose the being you want to be, and by choosing a being other than what you are now expressing, you start the change of the feeling of I. I can't do it for you. I can guide. I can hold the lantern. That's what we're doing here. but you have to walk the steps. Now, how will I know that I have changed the feeling of I? By beginning first with an uncritical observation of my reactions to life, and then noticing my reactions when I think I'm identified with my choice. If I assume that I am the man that I want to be, let me observe my reactions. If they are as they were, I have not identified myself with my choice, for my reactions are automatic. And so if I am changed, I would automatically change my reactions to life. So the changing of the feeling of I results in a change of reaction, which change of reaction is a change of environment and behavior. But let me warn you now, you must perk up your ears. Neville's about to give a warning of sorts. A little alteration of mood is not a transformation. It's not a real change of consciousness. Because as I change my mood for the moment, it can quickly and rapidly be, I would say, replaced by another mood in the reverse direction. When I say that I was changed, as that gentleman changed his mood, his basic mood, his state of consciousness, it means that having assumed that I am what the moment denied, that what my reason denied, that I remain in that state long enough to make that state stable. So that all of my energies are flowing from that state. I am no longer thinking of that state, I'm thinking from that state. So that wherever a state grows so stable as to definitely expel all of its rivals, then that central habitual state of consciousness, from which I think defines my character and is really a true transformation or change of consciousness. Whenever I reach that state of stability, watch my world mold itself then in harmony with this inner change. And men will come into my world. People will come to aid, and they will think they are initiating the urge to help. They are only playing their part. They must do what they do because I have done what I did. Remember, the fruits of that state will show. Whatever state you occupy, you will beget the fruits of the state. Having moved from one state into the other, I have altered my relationship relative to the world roundabout. And that changed relationship compels a change in behavior relative to my world. So they have to act differently toward me. So in changing the I, you start with desire, which you will unfold and elaborate on tomorrow night, which we will unfold and elaborate on tomorrow night. For it starts with desire. Desire is the spring of action. For you must want to be other than what you are. We fail because we do not fall in love enough with an idea. We aren't, I would say, moved enough to want to be other than what we are. If I could get you to be completely in love with some state to the point where it haunted the mind, I could almost prophesy that you would, in the not distant future, externalize that state within your world. And the reason we fail, we aren't hungry enough to change. For either we do not know the law, or we haven't the urge or the hunger to really bring about the change. For the changing of the feeling of I results in a change of reaction, which change of reaction results in a change of world. If you like your world and you are complacent about it, you haven't started on the road of the mysteries, for the very first beatitude appeals to one who is not complacent. Blessed are the poor in spirit. You must be poor in spirit, not complacent, not satisfied. The man who thinks that by reason of birth, the religion that he inherited at birth is good enough for me, that he is not dissatisfied, he is not, I would say, moved. That being is complacent, and therefore he is not poor in spirit. He is very rich in spirit. Theirs is not the kingdom of God. For if I can stir you, make you dissatisfied with self, then you will recognize that self and set about to change it. For the only field of activity for man is within himself and on himself. You do not work on the other. The day you change self, that day you change your world. Now, I see my time is going to its quick end. And so in the remaining minute I have left here, let me not urge you, because if you come to the meeting tomorrow night, not really hungry, you wouldn't benefit. But I do hope that many of you are there. Even if you are stirred to the point of trying to, I would say, disprove what I told you. I would accept that challenge, for in the attempt to disprove it, I know if you were sincere in your attempt, you would prove it. So I hope many of you will come and take this feast with us. We are here in the city at the Ebel for 15 nights, Monday through Friday. As Mr. Smith told you, for 3 consecutive weeks. If you can't take all, and I do hope many of you will take all, then pick out the titles that appeal to you. Wow. 1953, Ebel Theater. That was the year this house was constructed that I'm sitting in right now. In some levels, the house seems so far in the distant past. But in some moments, as he's describing these 3 weeks, these 15 nights, I can see them as if they're right down the road. And I know the Ebel Theater is right down the road. I would just love to be there for these particular 15 nights in 1953. I'm going to go ahead and create that dream. If you can't take all, and I do hope many of you will take all, then pick out the titles that appeal to you. Tomorrow night, to me, is basic. It is the importance of defining an aim in this world, having a goal, for without an aim, you are aimless. And you were warned in the book, or I would say in the Epistle of James, that the double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. Let not such a man believe that he shall receive anything of the Lord, for he is like a wave that is driven and tossed by the wind. End quote. That man never reaches his goal. So you must have an aim. And tomorrow night we will show you the importance of defining desire. There are certain schools who teach you to kill out desire. We teach you to intensify desire and show you the reason for such teaching. Show you what the Bible teaches about desire. And now we will come to the help of many of you. And now we will come to the help that many of you have asked for today. Those who were not here on Sunday, let me remind you, it's a very simple technique. As I told you on Sunday, anytime that you exercise your imagination and do it lovingly on behalf of another, you are mediating God to man. So we sit quietly and we simply become imitators of our Father. And He called the world into being by being the thing He would call. And so we sit and we listen as though we heard someone congratulating us on having found what we seek. So we go to the end of the matter and we listen just as though we heard, and we look as though we saw, and we try in this manner to feel ourselves right into the situation of our answered prayer. And there we wait in the silence just for about 2 minutes. And so we will lower the lights to aid you. And let me remind you, if you want to clear your throat, please do so. If you want to shift your position in the chair, do so. Feel as though you are alone at home, because if you don't, and you try not to disturb the neighbor, you will not be able to exercise your imagination on behalf of anyone. So now I will take the chair and simply listen attentively, just as though you heard. I'll make you this promise: the day you are still in mind, the day you are very still in mind, and really become attentive, you will hear as coming from without what really you are whispering from within yourself. Let us go into the silence. If you're able to, just close your eyes and just hear your friend congratulating you in total surprise, very, very happy for you, congratulating you on becoming the person you wish to become. They are so happy for you. And they're saying to you, I am so, so happy for you, excuse me. I love it so much. You look so beautiful. You look so radiant. I am so happy for you. Congratulations. Congratulations. Isn't it wonderful? Isn't it wonderful? Thank you. Hug. Hug. High five. Smiles all around. You can pause it. You can continue the silence. Take 2 minutes of straight silence. After you pause it, go there. Hear them. Just do it. Just do it. No one else is coming to do it for you. This is up to you. This is kind of like that Ferris Bueller moment. Are you still here? Come on. Do it. Neville Goddard, 1953 lectures. The fundamentals. From 1953, we have a handful of lectures. We're going to go through them anyway. They're wonderful. This one, the fundamentals. It is a difficult task to summarize in a few hundred words what I consider the most basic ideas on which those who seek a true understanding of metaphysics should now concentrate. I shall do what I can in the shape of 3 fundamentals. These fundamentals are self-observation, definition of aim, and detachment. Good stuff right there. The purpose of true metaphysics is to bring about a rebirth or radical psychological change in the individual. Such a change cannot take place until the individual first discovers the self that he would change. This discovery can be made only through an uncritical observation of his reactions to life. The sum total of these reactions defines the individual's state of consciousness. And it is this state of consciousness that attracts the situations and circumstances of his life. So, the starting point of true metaphysics on its practical side is self-observation. In order to discover one's reactions to life, reactions that form one's secret self, the cause of the phenomena of life. With Emerson, I accept the fact that man surrounds himself with the true image of himself. What we are, that only we can see. There is a definite connection between what is outer and what is inner in man, and it is always our inner states that attract our outer life. Therefore, the individual must always start with himself. It is oneself that must be changed. Man in his blindness is quite satisfied with himself, but heartily dislikes the circumstances and situations of his life. He feels this way not knowing that the cause of his displeasure lies not in the condition, nor the person with whom he is displeased, but in the very self he likes so much. Not realizing that he surrounds himself with the true image of himself, that what he is, and that what he is, that only can he see. He is shocked when he discovers that it has always been his own deceitfulness that made him suspicious of others. Self-observation would reveal this deceitful one in all of us, and this one must be accepted before there can be any transformation of ourselves. At this moment, try to notice your inner state. To what thoughts are you consenting? With what feelings are you identified? You must be ever careful where you are within yourself. Most of us think that we are kind and loving and generous and tolerant, forgiving and noble, but an uncritical observation of our reactions to life will reveal a self that is not at all kind and loving, generous and tolerant, forgiving and noble. It is this self that we must first accept and then set about to change. Rebirth depends on inner work on oneself. No one can be reborn without changing this self. Anytime that an entirely new set of reactions enters into a person's life, a change of consciousness has taken place. A spiritual rebirth has occurred. It is very fascinating, and you're just going to love it. I mean, at first you're going to be like, what is happening? What is happening to everything that I hold so dear and cherish so much? Well, you want to throw them away now. All of it. You want to burn the ships. You get that first feeling of detachment and you want to burn everything. If you don't want to burn everything, you need to arrive at the place where you want to burn everything. All right? Just take that from me. Burn the ships, my advice. I'm going to repeat this. Rebirth depends on inner work on oneself. No one can be reborn without changing this self. Anytime that an entirely new set of reactions enters into a person's life, a change of consciousness has taken place. A spiritual rebirth has occurred. Yes. Having discovered through an uncritical observation of your reactions to life, a self that must be changed, you must now formulate an aim. That is, you must define the one you would like to be instead of the one you really are in secret. With this aim clearly defined, you must, throughout your conscious waking day, notice your every reaction in regard to this aim. The reason for this is that everyone lives in a definite state of consciousness, which, as we have already described, is the sum total of one's reactions to life. Therefore, in defining an aim, you are defining a state of consciousness, which, like all states of consciousness, must have its reactions to life. For example, if a rumor or an idle remark could cause an anxious reaction in one person and no reaction in another, this is positive proof that the two people are living in two different states of consciousness. If you define your aim as a noble, generous, secure, kindly individual, knowing that all things are states of consciousness, you can easily tell whether you are faithful to your aim in life by watching your reactions to the daily events of life. If you are faithful to your ideal, your reactions will conform to your aim, for you will be identified with your aim and therefore will be thinking from your aim. If your reactions are not in harmony with your ideal, it is a sure sign that you are separated from your ideal and are only thinking of it. Assume that you are the loving one you want to be and notice your reactions throughout the day in regard to that assumption. Your reactions will tell you the state from which you are operating. This is where the third fundamental detachment enters in. Having discovered that everything is a state of consciousness made visible, and having defined that particular state which we want to make visible, we now set about the task of entering such a state. For we must move psychologically from where we are to where we desire to be. The purpose of practicing detachment is to separate us from our present reactions to life and attach us to our aim in life. This inner separation must be developed by practice. At first, we seem to have no power to separate ourselves from undesirable inner states, simply because we have always taken every mood, every reaction as natural and have become identified with them. When we have no idea that our reactions are only states of consciousness from which it is possible to separate ourselves, we go round and round in the same circle of problems, not seeing them as inner states, but as outer situations. We practice detachment or inner separation so that we may escape from the circle of our habitual reactions to life. That is why we must formulate an aim and constantly notice ourselves in regard to that aim. This teaching begins with self-observation. Then asks, what do you want? What do you want? Sounds simple enough. And finally teaches detachment from all negative states and attachment to your aim. This last state, attachment to your aim, is accomplished by frequently assuming the feeling of your wish fulfilled. Frequently. We must practice separating ourselves from our negative moods and thoughts in the midst of all the troubles and disasters of daily life. Excuse me. No one can be different from what he is now unless he begins to separate himself from his present reactions and to identify himself with his aim. Detachment from negative states and assumption of the wish fulfilled must be practiced in the midst of all the blessings and cursings of life. The way of true metaphysics lies in the midst of all that is going on in life. We must constantly practice self-observation, thinking from our aim, and detachment from negative moods and thoughts if we would be doers of truth instead of mere hearers. Practice these three fundamentals and you will rise to higher and higher levels of consciousness. Remember always, it is your state of consciousness that attracts your life. Start climbing. What a wonderful, very short session with Neville. I don't know where he gave the lecture. I know it's 1953. Obviously at the Ebell Theater, I'm guessing, but a very short one. Might have been an introduction. I don't know. Profound in its brilliance. It is all of 2 pages and maybe a quarter. Listen to it as many times as necessary to get that definition of your aim after you self-observe and then you detach, which frees you to only attach to your aim and repeat it and repeat it, rinse it, repeat it, rinse it, repeat it over and over and over. All right, we're going to see you in the next one. Neville Goddard, 1953 lectures, sound investments. Today's subject is sound investments. I want to share with you today what I consider one of the truly great revelations of all time. On Sunday morning, April 12th, my wife woke from what was really a deep, profound sleep, and as she was waking, a voice distinctly spoke to her, and the voice said to her, and the voice spoke with great authority, said to her, "You must stop spending your thoughts, your time, and your money. Everything in life must be an investment." So she quickly wrote it down and went straight to the dictionary to look up the 2 important words in the sentence, spending and investing. The dictionary defines spending as to waste, to squander, to lay out without return. To invest is to lay out for a purpose for which a profit is expected. Then I began to analyze the sentence. You must stop spending your thoughts, your time, and your money, for everything in life must be an investment. As I dwelt upon it, I saw where everything is now. That through the portals of the present, all time must pass. And this psychological now, the state in which I find myself now, does not recede into the past. it advances into my future. So what I do now, every time I say now, they're all capitals. So what I do now is the all-important thing. So what I do now is the all-important thing, and thought is the coin of heaven. It is the money of heaven. And so the thought I entertain now, the thought to which I consent, as told us in Ephesians, all things when they are admitted are made manifest by the light, and all things when they are manifested are light. And the word light is defined as consciousness. Don't forget, right when you wake up in the morning, first thing, let there be light. It's right when your consciousness just comes into the awareness of being. That's first light, is consciousness. Then you load in your self-concept, who you think you are. That's the second layer, when you first give light to this being, this garment you're wearing for the day. The first light is awareness of being. The second light is the garment you're wearing. And the word light is defined as consciousness. So the state to which I now consent must be made manifest. And when it is manifest, it is only that state of consciousness made visible, coming to bear witness of the state in which I abided. So every moment of time, I am either spending or I am investing. Unfortunately, most of us spend the coin of heaven, and morning, noon, and night we live in negative states for which there is no return. When we could easily have invested that moment, so at the end of the day, that day, we really would have a wonderful portfolio. You can see why it is so important to not consent to the garbage. Even if it's coming from within your own mind, you must change it. You must change it. Only you have control of your thoughts and your feelings. That's our goal together, is to get you to be in total control of your thoughts and your feelings. That's the goal of this channel, with you. The religious-minded person invests possibly on Sunday morning. Through the service, he is lifted for a moment. If he is not overly critical, he might be carried away with the hymn. He might be carried away with the solo, the organ music, the address from the pulpit, and for a moment, he is investing, but the rest of the week, he spends. Now you know from experience, if you put all your money into one great concern, it may be wonderful. It may be sound, but at the end of a year, the directors may decide to reorganize and therefore decide to pass the dividend. And if you depended on a dividend check for your daily needs, though it is a good, firm, wonderful concern, when they pass the dividend, then you must either sell some stock or raise or borrow on it. While every moment of time you could have a marvelous portfolio, and if one passes a dividend check, it does not matter. If you devoted every moment of time to positive thinking, constructive thinking, by not accepting any rumor that does not contribute to the fulfillment of your desire. No matter what it is, it could be the most obvious fact in the world. If it does not contribute to the fulfillment of your dreams, do not accept it. If you are spending, if not by denying, but by complete indifference, complete non-acceptance, you turn to what you wish you could have heard instead of what you heard you are investing. It's not the hearing that matters. It's the admitting the truth of it that matters. All things when they are admitted, not all things when they are heard. But if you give consent to it, if you accept it as true, then you either spend by acceptance or you invest depending on the nature of state accepted. Do you need to go to your social media and see the spending? And if you, who sets eyes on any post per se, you are admitting So this revelation which came through my wife to me is one of the greatest that I have heard. Had it been told in our Bible, it would have been told in a strange meter. And the Lord God spoke unto her this day and said to her, his servant, and they would have told what revelation would have come in that manner, but it came to a normal, natural wife. Came in a normal, natural manner to instruct not only her, but to instruct her husband. For I was the first one to whom she told it, and I can't tell you what it has done to me since I heard it on the morning of the 12th of April. For it made me more aware of the moment, made me far more conscious of every moment of the day, so I am not spending. I must invest. Time is too precious, and because these moments do not recede, they do not pass away, they are always advancing into my future to either confront me with a waste or to show me some wonderful return. If I invest, it's for a purpose, and therefore I hope, not only hope, I expect a reward. I expect a profit on my investment. So a moment spent now, this very day, could tomorrow pay you great dividends. It's the same when you're talking to people. Are you spending or are you investing? Like I just said about social media, if you're talking to somebody, are you spending or are you investing? Is there advice? Is there constructive? Is there positive things happening in that conversation? Are you spending or are you investing? And if you're investing, you should hope to see a return. Don't forget, imagining lovingly is investing. Now, I told a story 2 weeks ago of Jimmy Fuller. Well, I didn't have all the details of the story, but after the meeting, dozens of you said to me, not only after the meeting that day, but after my meetings at the Ebell Theater, that Jimmy Fuller, to have made that fortune, the fortune that he made, must have had great capital. Well, I could neither affirm nor deny your bold assertion, for you spoke as though you knew, and many of you almost convinced me that he had great capital, and that's why he returned it into great returns. So on Friday, I asked him to tell me more of the details. He said, when you came here 4 years ago, Neville, I came to hear you. I love this story. I just love this story. He said, when you came here 4 years ago, Neville, I came to hear you. My wife asked me, why do you come to hear Neville? Who told you of Neville? He said, I turned the radio on one night and I heard Dr. Bales. I had never heard of the man before, but at the end of his lecture, which I thoroughly enjoyed, he said, Neville is coming to speak for us, and it is a must. M, capital U, capital S, capital T, with a capital M. Well, the next night, I so liked Dr. Bales that I turned him on the next night, and for the next 2 weeks, he kept on promoting you, and he was so generous in his praise. I thought, I've got to hear this man. So when I came, I enjoyed what I heard on Sunday morning, and then you announced you were speaking the following night at this place. But it was $2. This is where it gets good. Well, he said, between myself and the next, I actually had $54. I had a wife and a little boy. We couldn't leave the little child alone. He was a babe. It meant a sitter in. But my wife and I came to everything you gave, and one night we could not pay the sitter in. We just didn't have it. But we took our last, which was $54, and came to your every meeting. The two of us, and one night we didn't have it to pay that sitter in. 3 years later, Neville, I had not proven your theory. You know my problem, as I told you before. Talking about the color, the pigment of his skin. Perchance there is someone here who did not hear it. The man is a Negro, and his problem was that he was a Negro. All the marks and stripes of the world were against him. I tried to convince him it was only in his own mind that these stripes were placed. His acceptance of that as restriction made it restriction. But if he could only drop it by non-acceptance, by complete indifference to the pigment of skin, he could accomplish his every dream by acceptance of it now. Well, in the last year, Jimmy Fuller, by complete acceptance, investing his moment, his now, has turned the year into a net profit of $250,000. He did not have one penny when he started. He did not raise large capital. He didn't have it. He only invested God's coin. God gave it to him. He gave him the moment, which is time. Don't even be confused. If you're able to hear this message right now, it doesn't matter what the clock says your age is. You are in time. You are in the moment. It is time to invest. So instead of spending his thought, which everyone has, and spending his time, which everyone has, he had no money, but he knew that thought was money. So he invested his thought in the now, knowing that it was not going to recede and vanish from sight. That was an investment. It would advance into his future. Well, it did. It is so advanced that he tells me now everything he touches turns to gold. Now he has 3 children. They come here every Sunday to Sunday school. He doesn't want his children to start with his stripes, so he wants them to feel what his church gives. So every Sunday, Jimmy tells me many a Sunday, he feels like taking off for the beach or up to the mountains with his wife, but he will not go because he wants his children to have an opportunity he didn't have. He says, my people were very religious, but they must have worshiped a very poor God, for they were steeped in poverty. So I just wouldn't go near the churches of my mother and my brothers and these people because I couldn't conceive of such a God doing that to us, yet they never missed a service. For when I found in this, what I found here in this Science of Mind church, I brought my children to Sunday school. Now this is what happened to them. Here, God is love. And love surrounds them, and they know nothing but love. That God is love. For one day, my little girl, who is my youngest of the 3, was quite sick, a beastly cold, and that night when the little boys said their prayers, these are the words they used. Thank you, God, that sister is perfect tomorrow. They could not look at the little girl, sick as she was, and say, thank you, God, that sister is well now, but they said, thank you, God, that sister is perfect tomorrow. Neville, it was a miracle. The next day, that child was perfect. There wasn't a sign of a cold, a complete absence of all that we saw the night before. And these 2 little brothers simply gave thanks. Now, he wanted a watch. I wouldn't give him the watch. I could have bought 1,000 watches for him. I want my little son to learn a law which I didn't know until recently. If you're listening to this and you have children, take heed. So he filled his mind with the possession of a watch, and he spoke of the watch as a live watch. One that ticks, one that is alive, not a toy watch. So then he fills his mind with the possession of the watch. On his way to school, he found a live watch. Now he knows the working of law, that the complete acceptance of the state in consciousness must result in an externalization of the state accepted. So if he accepts the watch, he need not turn to his earthly father as the medium through which the watch will come. I don't want to think for 1 second he has to point to his mother or his father as the only channels through which his good will come. I want him to recognize an infinite Father, the Father of us all, who gave to him as he gave to me everything that I will accept. I want my children to learn it as I have learned. Yes, I could shower him with gifts, but then he would look to me as the only channel through which it will come. That I must not accept. So you should see the little boys and little girls actually live by this law. God to them is love. And the only reality in love surrounds them. So they never miss the Sunday school here. Then he goes on to tell me all the other wonderful things that have happened by the mere acceptance of this law. He said, the getting of my car, this convertible Cadillac. I treated it loosely. I sat quietly in my living room and drove my Cadillac, and I simply treated for this loosely. He said, I didn't put real effort into it. I accepted it, and then when I decided to get it, I simply put in 3 telephone calls, and that day I was driving this car. Neville, now everything happens just like that. Today, instead of going to my office and working in the office, I work behind the scenes. I sit all day and I hear the report that is good from my employees. My entire office staff must tell me good news. The only thing I will allow myself to hear. Simon Peter. I ride my car. I am in the office. I'm at home. I'm in the office, but I'm only hearing good news. And seldom do I go to the office physically to do office work. So I'm behind the scenes only hearing good news. So I have completely forgotten the so-called pigment of skin. And Neville, honestly, I can tell you today, I feel that I am blessed beyond all men because I was born a Negro. I am so proud to be born a Negro. I am so proud I'm one. Awesome. And here is a story that will interest all of you. He said, I have some property to dispose of. I had certain things in investments for those who had money. And so I advertised it, and a man called me on the wire. He saw the ad and asked me if I was the gentleman. So I told him I was the one who had the property. The first thing he said to me, I don't want property. Jimmy said. I didn't answer. As if I hadn't heard the word. If he wants to be prejudiced, he may be prejudiced. That's his right. He wants to be silly about it. That's his right. He can spend. He need not invest. So I said, it is all perfectly all right, sir. I have all kinds of property. I have all kinds of things for your investment. A week later, he called me up and said, would you come and see me? He said, I went to see him. When I got out of my car, his knees almost buckled, for he didn't know a Negro was coming to see him, and a Negro walked up his stairs into his living room. He said within a matter of minutes, he purchased $37,000 worth of mine that I had to offer. He said the first $25,000 that he bought, he simply bought that to buy back his face, and then the remaining $12,000, he bought that because it was very good investment. Well, since that time, this gentleman has spent tens of thousands of dollars with me and constantly calls me to thank me because they are such wonderful investments. Now, here's a man who is proud of his skin. He has no prejudices because that's spending his time. He can't afford to spend. So in harmony with the revelation given to my wife, let us all now stop spending our thoughts, our time, and our money. For everything in our life must be an investment. We know the truth. This platform radiates the truth. You are told that everything proceeds out of your own consciousness, but what you and you alone accept as true, that will externalize itself and mold itself in your environment. All the conditions that you will ever encounter will simply bear witness of the state you have accepted. Well, if you don't like what you are encountering, then stop spending and learn the art of investment, for every moment of time is an opportunity to invest, not to spend. Yet on the other hand, you and I are free. We are free to waste every coin in the world. For that we have a right. We are free beings, we can spend, we cannot invest. We are free beings, we can spend, we need not invest. But if you know you can invest, why not choose the wiser way? Now we are told in the 13th chapter of the book of Deuteronomy, the commandment I command you this day is not hidden, and it is not far off. It's near unto thee, it is in thy mouth and in thy heart. Now I set before you this day life and good, death and evil, blessings and cursings. Choose life, choose blessing. But the choice is ours, for we are free. He sets before us this day, this very moment, a commandment. He sets everything before us. It's not far away. It's in our tongue right now. And before me now is a blessing or a curse. I can accept the fact you don't like me. It doesn't matter. And may love me. But if I accept the fact that you don't like me, don't like the teaching, I'm spending my time. Tomorrow you'll prove to me that I have spent my time by your behavior relative to me. On the other hand, if I accept the fact that you do like it because you are proving it, then I would have no doubt in my mind that you could not do anything other than contribute to this teaching. So it is up to me to either bless myself or curse myself. I can choose life or I can choose death. I can choose the good, but I am free. I can choose the evil. It's entirely up to me. But if you and I loved this, accept it and believe it. Then we are wise indeed. If knowing the whole is before us, we go out determined to become investors, not spenders, not wasting and squandering our substance, but laying it out for a purpose. Every moment become conscious of the moment. What are you doing? I am accepting now the fact that I am a noble, dignified, wonderful being, that my Father is proud of the Son who is like him. Let's repeat that. Let's brand that. I am accepting now the fact that I am a noble, dignified, wonderful being, that my Father is proud of the Son who is like him. Nice. So I will not hear or accept as true anything other than that which contributes to that noble concept I will hold of myself. For I will see that I am secure, and maybe a headline would startle the world, but I will not accept it. News. For if I don't admit to it, it can't proceed out of me. For all things, when they are admitted, are made manifest. Not unless they are admitted. You must be very, 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 very careful of all the crap that's shown to you, because if you take and grab it, you're admitting it. You're admitting it into your tabernacle. What comes out of your tabernacle? What you put in, what you admit, what you consent. Don't let it in. So I now will admit that using this moment as my moment to invest, if I am what reason denies, what my senses deny, and I proceed in that assumption, knowing that even though it doesn't confirm itself tonight or tomorrow, I will still live in the assumption that I am what I want to be, and all day tune in and listen only for the good report. I know these are investments, and tomorrow these dividend checks must come. They must come. That's the law of our being. So everyone here, take it to heart. And though you don't need money, and so I say to the hundreds of you who say to me in private, he must have had money, I tell you, I know the story now. I didn't know it when you boldly claimed that he had money, but now I have it from the source. He had only $54. And the $54 he spent coming to my meetings, even when he couldn't spend $1 on a sitter-in. So I tell you, he didn't have it. He has it today, but you don't need even $54. You don't even need $54. All you need is time, and you have it. It's now. What do you think these videos are right now? Did I drop sharply? Charge you $54 for this? All you need is time, and you have it. It's now. All you need is the thought. That's money. So instead of spending that now and spending the thought in the now, invest it now for your now, this very moment, as I stand here, and I will get off the platform in a little while, and you will think, well, now this is gone. He'll come back next year. This is not gone. What I am doing now is going to slip away. It's going to move forward and embody itself as a condition, embody itself as the circumstance of my life. So that my nows, my reactions to what I'm hearing and saying and seeing, all of my reactions are in the now, and my reactions are spelling out my tomorrow. So I will repeat it through the doorway of now, because he said, I am the door. I am is always first person present, not I was the door or I will be the door. I am the door. I am the resurrection. So what I do in the present now is not going to recede. It is going to advance into my future. For through the door of the present, of the now, all time must pass. Now don't spend it as it passes. As it passes through the door of the now, invest it. Every moment of your life, see that it is a positive, constructive, noble moment. I promise you a wonderful, healthy, radiant future if you will invest the now. Now, this being my last talk for a little while, I would like, while I have this opportunity, because the theater, the e-bell, can't take all of you, I hope that many of you will come this coming week and make it a really fruitful, wonderful week. But I know you can't all get into the e-bell. So here, one lady, as I came through the door, said, Neville, you made it so clear on Friday night, something I'd not seen before, for you told us this year you brought a wonderful revelation, and that is the wide difference between thinking from an end and thinking of an end. For you emphasized that time and time again since you've been here this time, but I didn't get it until Friday. I said, well, how did you get it? She said, your picture of the balcony and the stage. Well, now we have the same situation here. We have a balcony, so we have a stage. Well, if she, having heard it so often, didn't get it, the chances are many of you didn't get it. Well, now she got it by my illustration, so I will repeat the illustration that all may get it. I said that when a man learns the art of thinking from the end, that man is a master of his fate. For he defines his end. He formulates an aim in life and then feels himself right into the situation of that end. So he thinks from it instead of thinking of it. The average man defines his dreams, but he remains back here looking at them before he's thinking of them. The wise man occupies the state of his dreams, so he radiates from it. He thinks from it. And then to use this little illustration, I'm standing here looking out at the auditorium, and I would describe this theater based from this angle, for I am seeing it from the stage. You, sitting in the auditorium or sitting in the balcony, you are looking at it from that state. So you would see the screen and the speaker. So the difference between us, we see the same theater from different angles. I would define it from here, and you would define it from there. If I desire to get your point of view while standing here, I would assume that I am seated where you are, and therefore within my imagination look from that position. I would then have to see the stage, not the auditorium. I would see the little thing behind me, this cyclorama, and I would describe the theater from that position, which I am assuming that I am. Not if that position represents, say, one of security and this one of insecurity. I would then assume by physically standing here, assume that I am now secure. And to prove that I am, I would then look from the state of security. So I would describe the world relative to my assumption. If I am still seeing what I saw when I was insecure, I have not succeeded in occupying the desirable end. I am still only thinking of it. So the wide difference between thinking from and thinking of must be clearly seen, and then see the wisdom in learning the art of thinking from a desired end. So here, look out at your world. Formulate your lovely aims in life and just ask yourself, what would it be like were it true that I now embody that state? How would I feel? And in response to that question would come a feeling that corresponds to that end. Learn then to think from that end. Though reason denies it, though everything denies it, you occupy that end. It's now you're investing it, and these will become real within your world. Now, another thought that I try to make clear, and it's this, which again, Jimmy Fuller told me was one of the cues of his success. When the action of the inner man corresponds to the action the outer man must take in order to appease his desire, he will definitely realize his desire. Jimmy Fuller's wisdom. Remember now, 1953, the man's making $250,000 the first year he's applying. It took him 3 years to figure it out and squash all the bugs in there. The head trash had to be tossed out. It took him 3 years. His fourth year, he was earning in profit $250,000. Would you put in the effort? Would you put in 1 night, 6 nights, 1 week, 6 weeks, 12 weeks? Would you do that much to assume that you're the man you want to be? Back to Jimmy Fuller's wisdom. Another thought that I tried to make clear, and it's this, which again Jimmy Fuller told me was one of the cues of his success. When the action of the inner man corresponds to the action of the outer man must take in order to appease his desire, he will definitely realize his desire. When the action of the inner man corresponds to the action the outer man must take in order to appease his desire, he will definitely realize his desire. When the action of the inner man corresponds to the action of the outer man must take in order to appease his desire, he will definitely realize his desire. There are two of us. There is an inner man and an outer man. The outer man is always made to say, I of myself can do nothing. The Father within me, this inner one, he doeth the work. What I see him do, that I, the outer, do also. So there is an inner you. If I now sat here and immobilize my body by relaxing it, and then imagine what the outer would have to do in order to appease his desire, and with the outer relaxed, just let me imagine that I am actually it now. So I keep the body immobilized, but I imagine that I am actually experiencing it now. I would experience in my imagination that which I would have to experience in the flesh to appease desire. And then imagine that state over and over and over. So the actions of the inner man correspond to the actions the outer man must take in order to realize desire. When that is done, I promise you, it's going to be done in the flesh. No power in the world could stop it when these two actions coincide. But let it always be from the inner you. Wow. Wow. I imagine they went into a silence right here because of the following sentence that says, and now at the end of the silence, this is what we do. But let us go into the silence if that's what he did just now anyway. And imagine this inner self and outer self joining forces, being in sync. Because you follow your desire all the time. So your outer you and inner you are always in sync. And now at the end of the silence, this is what we do, knowing that any time that we exercise our imagination lovingly on behalf of another, we are actually and literally mediating God to man. So we can sit quietly in the darkness and simply listen as though we heard the good report that we want to hear. We look into the darkness and imagine we are seeing what we want to see. This is then investing this 2 minutes. We have taken the moments that we go to make up 2 minutes and really are investing it now. So when I take the chair and the lights are lowered, let us listen and let us look as though we are hearing and seeing what we want to hear and see. And we are actually fulfilling the command of that wonderful voice that spoke to my wife when it said to her, you must stop spending your time, your thoughts, and your money, for everything in life must be an investment. Let these 2 minutes be your greatest investment. Now, here, your friend, your spouse, your mom, your dad, your brother, sister, uncle, aunt, niece, nephew, cousin, tell you the good news. They've never had more. They've never been more happier. They've never felt better. They've never had more. They're telling you that. They've never had more. They've never felt better. And you say, congratulations. That is so wonderful. Isn't it wonderful? And you hug them or you high five them, but you definitely touch them. Isn't it wonderful? Thank you. Isn't it wonderful? Isn't it wonderful? Thank you. You can pause and go 2 minutes. 2 minutes, I believe Neville found as a very, very good amount of time. We can start to stretch these videos out to 2 minutes if you like, but I think you can just pause it, considering it's a video, and it's not live. But if you want to, let me know, and we can just do guided meditation for 2 minutes, basically, which is what we just did for a very short one. Neville Goddard, Sound Investments, 1953, and I think that was April 12th, his wife got the message from her awareness of being, from all that is, from I am, from God himself directly. Wow. That was a great one. All right, we're going to see you in the next one. Neville Goddard, 1953 lectures, Your Supreme Dominion. As you have been told, this morning's subject is your supreme dominion. As a man does not possess it, or he does not know that he possesses it, for he certainly is not exercising it. As we read in the very first chapter of the book of Genesis, and God made man in his own image. In the image of God made he him. He made them male and female, and God blessed them. And God said unto them, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it and have dominion over all the fish of the sea and all the fowls of the air and everything moving that moves upon the earth. And God saw all that he had done. All that he had done, all that he had made, and they were very good. Now you and I, reading the Bible, not knowing it to be a psychological truth and seeing it as a historical fact, we cannot understand the word. But when man knows the Bible is the greatest collection of psychological truths that was never intended to be seen as history or cosmology, then he gets a glimpse into this great, wonderful book. For man himself is the great psychological earth that must be subdued. In man move all the passions, all the great emotions symbolized as creeping things and animals. In the deep of man actually live the invisible states symbolized as fish. In the deep of man actually live all the unnumbered infinite ideas symbolized as the fowls of the air. It is this man that must be self-subdued. For subdue it, then comes the promise, and have dominion over this vast, wonderful country that is man. If man does not know that he himself is the earth spoken of, he thinks he must go out into the world and conquer it. The world reflects the work done on man, and so when he looks upon this wonderful world round about him, he thinks himself so little. The Bible also tells us he calls himself a grasshopper. And referring to himself as a grasshopper, he sees giants in the land, the giants of industry, the giants of economics, the giants round about him, and he feels smaller and smaller because he does not know how to go about actually subduing the earth, which is himself. Which is what we are learning to conquer together here on this channel. When man knows it, he will realize that man as an individual is supreme within the circle of his own consciousness. For within the circle of his own consciousness, the entire drama of life is reenacted over and over again. He has to start with self, and then he will see this outer, wonderful world, this visible world, is not what he thinks it to be, a place of exile from God. It is the living garment of the Father. And although to many of us its discordant harmony needs some interpretation, to the wise it has a voice, and the voice speaks of hidden things behind the veil of man's mind. For this whole vast, wonderful world is a response to the arrangement of man's mind. For when he knows it, he will look within for the hidden causes, look into the deep to see the fish and how they swim and how they are related. For this arrangement of the deep is going to project itself as circumstances and conditions of life. And so today, if you haven't started, today is the time to start to really put into practice this teaching and make of this violence a garden of God. It is called Eden. And man was placed within it to keep it and to care for it. For the garden of God is man. It is the mind of man. You never find a garden unless a man is present. For without a man, there would be a forest of wilderness. But when a man is placed in it, he begins to cut the trees or the seeds of wrong thinking. He clears the ground and he cultivates the ground and then plants wisely. Then you will have dominion, for you will select the seed you will plant, the ideas you will entertain. You will cultivate them. Knowing the outer world constantly bears witness of the inner arrangement of mind, you will only select the things you want to project into the living garment of your Father. For the whole vast world round about you is a living garment worn by your Father. So how did he reap? He said he made man in his own image. Well, the methods of mental and spiritual knowledge are entirely different. You and I can know a thing mentally by looking at it from the outside, by comparing it with other things, by analyzing it, by defining it, by even giving a description of it. But we can know a thing spiritually only by becoming it. We must be the thing itself if we would know that thing spiritually. We must be the thing itself if we would know that thing spiritually. We must be in love if we would know love. We must be God if we would know what God is. For God made me not out of something other than himself. He made me perfect, so he made me perfect, so he made me by becoming me. There was no other way in the world that God could have made me unless he became me. So God became man that he may know man in the only way that he could know anything, for he knows all things spiritually, and he calls them very good. So he made me by becoming me, and now I am called upon to go and take care of the earth and to subdue it and take dominion. And I am the earth. I must learn to plant as he planted. And he planted the world by becoming the world. I must now plant as man by becoming the man I want to be. So I will itemize all the things, name them, give a name to everything I want to express as a man, and then know it spiritually by becoming. And I become it as he became me. I identify myself with it and live in that identity, and I clothe it in flesh. I clothe it in fact. Not one thing in the world that is mine can be taken from me save by detachment from the state where that thing I love has its natural life. If I live in a world of beauty, if I live in a world of friendship, of comfort, and all the lovely things that men enjoy, no power in the world can take one of them from me, save I, who live among them, detach myself from the state where these lovely things have their natural life. When you and I know it, we begin to cultivate the earth. We actually weed the mind of all negative states, all unlovely emotions, and we bring into subjection not the outer, but the inner. And then the outer reflects that cultivation on self. Now, how is it done? You are told in the first book of the Bible how it's done. For the promise is to the man who does it, and the promise is a complete expansion beyond his wildest dreams of the state he plants. The one who first did it was called Jacob. Well, I am Jacob. You are Jacob if you start to plant. Every man is the potential Jacob, and Jacob did it by righteousness. As you are told, he did it through he did it through righteousness, and he multiplied exceedingly, so that he increased 1,000-fold his flocks, his cattle. He increased and grew beyond the measure of man in having all the maidservants and menservants and the camels. And this is what he said, my righteousness shall speak for me in time to come. Righteousness is right consciousness. The only right consciousness is the consciousness of already being the man you want to be. For that attaches you with an invisible state. You can't see it yet, but you can become attached to the state that you dare to assume you are. You go by fishing in the deep. Close your eyes, shut the door. I am, some breathing, and listen. Listen. You are beginning now to subdue the deep. You enter a state through the medium of feeling, through feeling that you are already what you want to be. And that is how you grow exceedingly great in your world. For you will be the Jacob expanding in your world. The next one we come upon is Job. Here in the midst of all the trials and tribulations of a man, Job says, I will hold fast to my righteousness, and then my heart shall never judge me harshly as long as I live. He will hold fast to righteousness in the midst of storm. In the midst of all the problems of the world, he will assume that he is free and hold fast to that right consciousness, knowing that in eternity could his heart ever judge him harshly. Knowing that not in eternity could his heart ever judge him harshly. Then we are told, the meek of the earth seek righteousness, and it is to the meek of the earth that the earth is given. As you are told, the meek shall inherit the earth. You might have been taught to believe it meant the beaten man, the man who falls and grovels like a grasshopper. It doesn't. The words meek, if translated, actually means to be tamed as a wild animal is tamed. To the man who tames the mind, the man who tames his being, that he can set it any task and have it execute that task, that man is meek. And the meek inherit the earth. And the meek always seek righteousness. So if I today began to subdue this earth, I must make righteousness my watchword. And so if I were righteous, I would now single out the nature of the trees I would plant, the nature of the flowers I would plant, the nature of the animals I would cultivate, the nature of the fish I would catch, and I would name them as desirable states called in the Bible beauty instead of ashes, called in the Bible the spirit of joy instead of mourning, called by all these lovely things. As you are told, all the things that are good, dwell on those things. To every good thing, for he called it very good. Everything that I would call the good, which is a righteous judgment, will be the right judgment. I, in spite of the evidence of my senses that would deny it, in spite of reason that would tell me that it was impossible of realization, having discovered that I am the one planting my garden, that this is the only garden to cultivate, that is the only earth to subdue, I would start now and boldly assume the good, first for myself, always start with Jerusalem, then go into the world and preach the goodness by knowing the goodness. When you meet someone, regardless of what the appearance would reveal, know the truth for that one and set him free. Know that knowing as he ought to be, known first by himself, but if he wasn't known it as true of himself, you at least know it for him. Repeating, know that knowing as he ought to be known first by himself, but if he hasn't known it as true of himself, you at least know it for him. And though you never meet him in the flesh again, keep on knowing the truth that sets man free by knowing he is already free. And you are cultivating your garden. You are bringing it into subjection. You are subduing it, and then you shall have dominion. So you are supreme in your world if you only know the world that you really are. So man is the psychological earth on which this wonderful whirl of events takes place. Man is the psychological earth on which all the animals move. Every emotion is symbolized as the animal. Every fowl of the air is truly the idea you entertain. Every fish of the deep is the invisible state that you could catch if you only knew how to cast your net on the right side. For you fish all night and catch nothing, but then comes one who knows, who is righteous, and he casts it on the right side. Always that right side. And the right side is righteousness or right consciousness. And I will catch it. I will not see them. I don't have to see them. I don't have to wait for the evidence of my senses to confirm. For I am told, and faith was accounted unto him for righteousness. So I will have faith in the reality of the deep. I will have faith in the reality of invisible states. So it's now invisible. I know it's a fish, but I have faith in the existence and the reality of the invisible state I want to externalize. Knowing I can externalize it, for every time I externalize it, I add to this wonderful garment of my Father, and that is my job, my duty. So here, every one of us, begin to believe that you are the only earth spoken of in the Bible. You are the one chosen to live in the center of the garden, but make it a garden. For the words, keep it, and plant it well, you have dominion over every idea in your mind. You say you haven't. Well, some may be to you disturbing, but you do have the choice of rejecting it or accepting it. If you accept it, you identify with it, and the state with which you are identified must, by the very law of your being, objectify itself into your world. That you may see by it how you plant that garden. Now, don't wait 1 second beyond the time that you observe weeds instead of flowers. Start right at the moment of observation and start to replant the garden. Start really to subdue it. Become the meek, and the meek is the bold. The meek is the bold of heart who does not ask assistance. He walks knowing he can do it. He can fish. He can actually bring into subjection every bird of the air, every idea of the mind. This is where the birds of the air are. He will begin to know these things spiritually. He will know them in the only way that you and I should know anything, by becoming it. Not to have a world of information concerning objective things and knowing these things only mentally. I must learn to know things spiritually. I must learn to know what love is spiritually by being in love. I must learn to know what security is spiritually by becoming conscious of already being secure. I must learn to know what health is by becoming conscious of already being healthy and sustain these states in the name of righteousness, knowing that my righteousness shall answer for me in time to come. Make me no promise, for when the father-in-law said to Jacob, "What promise should I make you?" Just tell me that the offspring born in a certain manner shall be mine, and no other promise, and no wages, and no salary. All the spotted ones are mine. There isn't a spotted one among the parents, but every offspring that is spotted. Though the parents are not, that is mine. That's my wage, and my righteousness shall know it for me in time to come. And he begins to assume that his world is peopled and with the spotted calves, and everyone born that was healthy was born spotted, and he increased beyond the wildest dreams of a man. Well, become that man and start from the simple beginning as he started. There wasn't one thing in the world to encourage him that one calf could ever be born from parents that were not spotted and be a spotted calf. Yet he knew, and he assumed, that they had given birth to such things in numbers. They would come, and they came 1,000-fold. So in your case, maybe it's business. Maybe the doctors have given you a final verdict, and it's fatal. Well, I say, in spite of this, and the doctor is in his own way is doing his best, he would not have said it to hurt you or frighten you. He firmly believed it. But you have another law, and your law is that you can assume, in spite of that verdict, that you are well. And then, though tomorrow and the next day the trees don't appear, and then, though tomorrow and the next day the tree doesn't appear, know that in time your righteousness shall speak for you. And like Job in the midst of all the storms, when he should have gone to the grave, he held fast to the consciousness of already being what he wanted to be, that his heart may not in time speak harshly against him. Well, it didn't. You know the story. And so all through we are told, and so all through we are told, break off the sins, break off missing marks by righteousness. Blessed are they that hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. Now you are told, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all things shall be added unto you. Well, the kingdom of God is within you. You have been told that a number of times. The Bible affirms it over and over. The kingdom of God and the kingdom of heaven are within you. They aren't without. You see them seemingly without. That is the response to the withinness where they are. Remember. Now seek it and his righteousness. So assume within the mood that would be yours, where you're already the man that you want to be. Sustain that mood. Occupy it as often as you can. and see how that righteousness shall draw things unto itself. And the things it draws are always in harmony with its nature. It never draws anything foreign to itself. If I assume that I am the man I want to be, I cannot encounter events that are in conflict with my assumption, for my world mirrors the being I am. So here today, when you return, read the whole chapter. It's beautiful. But I started with the 27th verse, and God made man in his own image. In the image of God made he him, male and female made he them. Then comes what is to be done. Then comes the promise, if you do it. Then comes the judgment. It is good and very good. So you start knowing that you are the earth on which you now start to labor. If you do it, you shall be fruitful. And you will multiply. And you actually replenish this world. Though it seemingly is barren, you replenish it, you subdue it. And the earth is self to be subdued. Not by beating self, as some people have misunderstood, not by isolating the self in some little secluded spot, not by running away from life, but in the midst of life is the opportunity to become meek. To take the violence that is man, it is individual man, and then bring it into the state of the meek, to transcend the violence by not fighting against conditions. Know that conditions can only reflect what is within the one who observes that condition. And so don't rage against it. Leave it just as it is. If conditions remain the same, that is a sure sign that you have not been faithful to righteousness. Had you been faithful to the consciousness of already being the man you want to be, conditions would have to change in harmony with that righteousness. So don't rage against it. Leave it as it is. And start today to take this wonderful earth, you, which is the footstool of the Lord, which really is the mind of man, and start really to work upon it. Then you will not turn from left to right. You will keep the narrow path. You will go out knowing you can do it. I know from experience, it will not take long to see shoots appear. It will not take long to see the flowers appear. They will all appear. If you will take yourself in hand and by an uncritical observation of self, watch the being you are, see the condition of the earth as it is now by the uncritical observation of your reactions to life, when you see what you are that is showing you the state of the earth as it is now, don't condemn it, just start to subdue it. And know that you do have dominion over all the fish of the sea, fowls of the air, and all the animals that move upon the earth. Knowing them to be the moods of thought, the desires, the passions that move in you, start to entertain only the good and the very good. Dwell upon them and you will repeople your earth, for you are supreme within the circle of your own consciousness. Now you may say it's a very little one. May I tell you that though you have a body and a life of your own, you are rooted in me. And you end in me. As I am rooted in God and end in God. So every man can say the same thing, no matter if you look into a world of 2.5 trillion of them, and every year they slip through the gates into the invisible state relative to this world. That's 2.5 billion, excuse me. What does it matter? But as they come and go, every man in the world is actually rooted in you and ends in you. And you are rooted in the ultimate that we call God the Father. So the whole vast world is simply centered in you. Start now to rearrange it that it may reflect the beauty that you want to live about and live in this world. You do it by assuming the best. imagining lovingly, constantly. Always imagine the best of self. Always imagine first with Jerusalem and then go out and radiate what you have given to self. If you live in that wonderful state yourself, you will only have the good to shower upon others. For you have one gift that is truly yours to give, and that is yourself. You have no other gift. If you are good, you can give only the good. If you are not, well, whatever you are, that you give. So the story is, may you find today when you observe yourself, by observing your reactions, that it's not a very pleasant land, but it's still a fertile land. It can be cleared of all these trees of traditional wrong thinking and can be replanted in harmony with the beauty that you desire. And in the immediate present, it will bear fruit in harmony with the seeds you plant. So let us go determined to bring about a better arrangement of our mind, that we may produce more noble garments for our Father to wear. For this wonderful, visible, objective universe is only the living garment of my Father. It's not a place of exile, as so many believe, talking about home, and they're going home as though they are not now in the very midst of their Father. When you see me, you see my Father. Whenever you see me, you see the state of my mind, for you will see the world in which I live and the state of my mind, that inner arrangement. That's my Father. When you see me projected, then you call it the sun, and my world round about me tells me where I am. All these inner states are places in this fabulous psychological consciousness. Inner state is equal to place, and where I stand within myself determines what I see when I look outside the self. So when I look out upon the world, that area of my Father's garment, whether it be torn by reason of the inner place where I stand, or whether it be lovely, I see only the inner arrangement of myself. I am forever surrounding myself with the true image of myself, and what I am in consciousness that only I can see. Knowing that, let me be determined today to seek righteousness, or right consciousness, that I may reap in the immediate present all the lovely things that I desire. Now, in summary, single out some noble aim in life, having defined it clearly to yourself as a desirable state, the state you would like to externalize. Ask yourself this very simple question: what would the feeling be like were it true if I already embodied that noble state? In response to your question will come a feeling. Assume that feeling. It has a reality outside of the present moment. Its being is in complete independence of present objective fact. It has a real structure. It has a reality in the deep of it. It came in response to your call when you said, what would the feeling be like were it true? And you named it. What were you thinking of? And you named it what you were thinking of. If it was security, if it was health, if it was any state, that fish came from the deep. It's located, and you took the I and placed it in that feeling. You were actually standing upon it, though it is invisible. Now remain on it. If you remain in that state, you are told in the Bible 3 days, you will be spewed out on dry land. 3 doesn't mean 3 days. 3 means fullness. 3 means complete. So if I will live within that fish for 3 days until the whole thing seems natural and seems real, and it has the sensory vividness of reality, I will then be spewed out as something objective and something that is commonly called in the Bible land or dry land. But it does not have reality as you feel it. Only people get away from it because it doesn't have immediate objective fact to confirm it. But you ride it for 3 days, and you will know what it was to enter that fish and remain in it until fullness was attained, until reality was attained within. In that state you were righteous, and your righteousness will speak for you in time to come. It will not fail you. It cannot fail you. The last of his 1953 lectures, which we have a handful of. Neville Goddard, Your Supreme Dominion. Wow, what an amazing lecture. He's just getting down to business. And this is 1953. I mean, wow. The mind of Neville. We are still swimming through and investigating wonderfully. I hope you enjoyed it. We're going to see you in the next one. Neville Goddard, 1953 lectures, The Power of Awareness. Although a title of a great book of his, this is a lecture from that same year. I think you know how thrilled I am to be back here, for this is the one platform that grants me complete freedom. You know that. Dr. Bales has never once restricted me or even suggested any condition. He gives me complete freedom of this platform, and for that I am really very happy, for I couldn't be here unless he did. Now, I have brought you this year an entirely new series. I have named this first one, The Power of Awareness, because it is the foundation stone on which the entire structure rests. Not a thing has happened in the past year to shake that foundation. Many things have happened, many revelations, many experiments, and yet the foundation remains intact. For those not familiar with this foundation, we make the claim that consciousness is the one and only reality. So if you call God the ultimate reality, that is the name we give to this ultimate reality. So we say consciousness is God. We say consciousness in action is imagination. And if consciousness in action, or God in action, is the Son bearing witness of his Father, then we come to the conclusion that imagination is that Son. We have had nothing this year, as I tell you, to disturb that deep conviction. We look upon the world as, I would say, a manifestation of consciousness, and the whole vast conditions of men, but revelations of individual states of consciousness. We distinguish between the individual identity and the state of consciousness that it occupies. We distinguish between the individual identity and the state of consciousness that it occupies. You are an eternal being. The real you is the imaginative you, personified for us in our gospel as Christ Jesus. But man doesn't know it. But this is your real being. This being is your wonderful imagination. When we speak of the revelation of state, we simply mean that the state in which the real you for a moment abides, objectifies itself as the condition and the circumstances of your life. If you are dissatisfied with the conditions of life, there is no possible way of changing them unless you first change the state from which you view the world. For the state from which a man observes the world determines the world that man describes. For the world that is described from observation must be, as thus described, relative to the describing observer. In a very simple way, were I to ask you now, where is San Diego? And you answered about, I would say, approximately 130 miles from here. It's 118 miles from here. So that means Neville was just literally 12 miles that way at one time. Funny business. Here we go. I'm going to repeat. If, in a very simple way, were I to ask you, where is San Diego? And you answered about, I would say, approximately 130 miles from here. And then I ask another question, where is Santa Barbara? And you replied, approximately 100 miles from here. That way. Funny. This is very coincidental, but come last Monday, today's Monday, but last Monday, today's the 24th of March, 2025. Last Monday, we were gathering content, and we literally drove to San Diego at one point, and the next day drove to Santa Barbara, and all in between at all the beaches, all the crack of dawn and the dusk at night. Amazing, amazing footage. But coincidentally, we're at Santa Barbara, and you replied 100 miles from here, which literally it's the other way. Well, I do not have to be an Einstein to tell you where you are. For if you tell me where these two are, and one is 100 miles here relative to you, and the other is 130 miles from here relative to you, I know you must be somewhere within the vicinity of the city of Los Angeles. Now, obviously, in 1953, that's where Neville was abiding. Now, the same law holds good in any description you make of the world. If I ask you to describe your world socially, and I listen attentively to your description of the world, you are revealing your position in the social world to me. If I ask you to describe it intellectually, financially, spiritually, you may not know it, but the description that you offer of the world is revealing to me who listens, or to yourself, if you are attentive, that particular state of consciousness from which you view the world. And you will continue to see the world as you now see it unless you change your state of consciousness. Very, very telling paragraph right there. If I ask you to describe your world socially, and I listen attentively to your description of the world, you are revealing your position in the social world to me. If I ask you to describe it intellectually, financially, spiritually, you may not know it, but the description that you offer of the world is revealing to me who listens, or to yourself, if you are attentive, that your particular state of consciousness from which you view the world, it's going to be telling right off the bat. And you will continue to see the world as you now see it, unless, and here's the key, here's the magic, you change your state of consciousness. Now, there are certain words that in the course of long use gather very many strange connotations. And so in the course of time, they cease to mean anything at all. Such a word is the sub-conscious. Such a word is to, and do not be shocked, such a word is Christ Jesus. No two have the same opinion of the word. No two have the same opinion of the word, the same definition or mood of the word. Let us now take a look at the word subconscious and see how it is defined for us. This is the definition as given to us in any good dictionary. It is that portion of mental state not directly within the focus of consciousness, but capable of being called into such focus by the proper stimulus. Now, that is the definition of this fabulous realm. Now, let us look at the claim made for this realm. Our mental scientists, psychiatrists, and psychologists of today refer to this region as the creative power in man. That everything in man's world is determined by the activities of the subconscious mind, that man himself has absolutely no control over the activities of this region unless he first gets into a relationship with it. For here is a region that they call the subconscious. Others call it the unconscious. And still others speak of it as the collective unconscious. But they claim for it a creative power that molds the outer world in harmony with the inner arrangement of its self. So they give it structure. They give it reality. They give it form. And they claim its structure determines the outer structure we observe and call the only reality. That any modification in the internal structure of this deep region results in corresponding changes in the outer objective world. But then they leave us at the mercy of it, unless we find the trick of entering into a relationship with it. Now let us turn to the gospel. What is said of the central character of the gospel, the one I refer to as Christ Jesus? It is said of the central figure that all things were made by him. And without him, there is nothing made that is made. All things, not a few things. All things. It includes all. I read my gospel carefully and I find that from within out is the order of the universe. From within out. In the 7th chapter of Mark, not what goes in defileth the man, but what proceeds out of the heart, either for good or for evil. Not just the good comes out, but the evil can come out too. All things come from within out. What goes within cannot defile the man. Only the thing that proceeds out of the heart of man can bless him or defile him, that there is some creative power in man that constantly molds the outer world in harmony with itself, and this creative power is described for us as Christ Jesus. Now let us take another look at what they teach us, that there is a method they use to pry into the deep of this region, that when a man is asleep, they use the method of dreams to pry into the deep. For the Bible tells us that from cover to cover, in a dream, when deep sleep falleth upon men, then he openeth the ears of men, and sealeth their instruction. You are told that God speaks with his prophets chiefly in dreams. It was a dream that prompted them all to bring about their great revelation. And you know, it's funny, in the Seth material, Seth did speak, remember now Jane was opposed to speaking of scripture or Jesus or the whole Bible interpretation at all. And Jane was very, very adamant about that. But in some places, Seth did describe the idea that what happened with the story of Christ is that it was all a dream. The entire event that we call Jesus, Mary, Joseph, all of these characters, which Neville has wonderfully described as being a part of a story that's happening in us, which is a great way to put that. And then in addition, it reconciles with Seth's revelation of the idea that it was all a dream. It was a dream in several people at the same time. And what's interesting even further than that is that Seth reveals in his teachings that it originally was a dream, and that the next coming will also happen in a mass dream. And if you're into the Neville material and you're this far in the videos and you're digging deeper and deeper, then you, of course, are working with your dreams. And all of this is a dream. You get to a level of understanding that this is all a dream. So this coming of Christ, of course, is through a dream. As he just described, the voice of God is coming to you and sealing his instruction in the deep of sleep. I say this is all a dream. It's an awake dream. When you wake up here, you claim that's the dream. And when you wake up there, you claim this is the dream. So, speaking of dreams, oh my goodness. Yes. Here we go. You are told that God speaks with his prophets chiefly in dreams. It was a dream that prompted them all to bring about their great revelation. Again, what Seth says. You are told that this wise man, the wisest of all, was promised riches and long life and great power, and behold, Solomon awoke. And it was a vision in the night. You are told the birth of the central figure was prophesied in a dream, and everything was but the dream. Now, we discover there's another way of looking into the deep, and the waking way of looking into the deep is through man's imagination. That imagination is now the waking method used to pry into this great mysterious deep. For the ancients discovered that if they would ever discover really the ultimate reality, it could never be by any instrument made by man. In order to discover the ultimate reality, they would have to set mind to observe itself and then to accurately record those observations. For they concluded that no description of mind made by any science known to man could be an adequate description of the mind which made that science. So when today we are speaking of taking the imagination to look into the deep, it is looking at itself. You set imagination to observe self and then to accurately record those observations. And you must come to the conclusion, imagination is the central figure of the gospel. When you will read your gospel with this in mind, the whole thing becomes a luminous book. One simple little passage, take it from any passage. If this was an open meeting, I would challenge you now to ask me anything concerning the central figure, and taking the simple little technique of identifying that figure with my own imagination, the answer will be automatic. So here is one. Peter, lovest thou me? ? Yea, Lord, thou knowest that I love thee, then feed my sheep. And 3 times the same question is asked, and 3 times a similar answer is given. And the last answer brought about a certain rebellion, for it was asked 3 times. But now you take it as imagination asking itself, I have discovered my Savior, I discovered my shepherd, and what would be the sheep? For our minds are like rambling sheep, or our thoughts like rambling sheep that have no shepherd. Now that you have found me to be your shepherd, to be your Savior, your own wonderful imagination to be the central figure, now do you love him? Your answer, yes. Well then, feed my sheep. Well then, did I not feed the sheep? At any moment, when did I not feed the sheep? When you did not do it unto the last among of one of these. Anytime you imagine any unlovely thought against another, you walked me in the mud. And then you said you loved me, but any time that your imagination was ever exercised on behalf of another, and it was not lovingly exercised, you did not feed me. You walked me in the mud. Imagine lovingly all the time. Just do it. And yet man goes blindly on believing he serves the Master, believing he truly understands Christ Jesus, that he understands and loves his Savior. And morning, noon, and night he imagines the unlovely things against his neighbor, not knowing at that very moment he was walking his Master in the gutter. And so we are told, I sought water, and he gave me not to drink. I sought food, and you gave me not. I sought shelter, and you took me not in. I needed raiment, and you clothed me not. But when did these things happen? I don't recall ever turning you away. When did you not do it unto the least among one of these? When you did not do it unto the least among one of these, you did not do it unto me. And then when did I do these things? Whenever you did it to the very least one of these, least among one of these, you did it unto me. And the day will come when man will discover the least spoken of is himself. When man discovers that the greatest of all tyrants, the one who is the most impudent of all the offenders, the one who is the greatest of all the beggars, is himself, then he will discover that he stands in need of the alms of his own forgiveness. And instead of railing against himself, he will start with he will start with self to ennoble his own thoughts, to lift himself up by imagining the best first of himself, and then he will share that with the world round about him. For he will look out on a world and describe it relative to himself, and he will not now see the unlovely things that formerly he saw. For this is what we mean by this foundation stone that so far has not been shaken. a very wise man, Emerson, that would be Ralph Waldo Emerson, whom also Seth spoke about quite fondly and described him as a speaker. In the Seth terms, in the Seth material, a speaker is someone who's here as a fun-loving, happy, enthusiastic, like a rolling stone that gathers no moss. A speaker is someone like that. I myself am a speaker. In the Seth 9 families of consciousness definition. And that's what he said of Emerson as well. And now here's Neville about to talk about Emerson, highly respected among the community, obviously. A very wise man, Emerson, said that whenever a true theory appears, it will be its own evidence. Its test is that it will explain the phenomena of life. I am convinced we have that true theory for this theory we give you here, that your consciousness is the only reality, and that the particular state of consciousness in which you abide is the sole cause of the phenomena of your life, cannot be shaken. This is a very important sentence. I am convinced, I'm going to repeat it, I am convinced we have that true theory. For this theory we give you here, that your consciousness is the only reality, and that the particular state of consciousness in which you abide is the sole cause of the phenomena of your life, cannot be shaken. I ask you to test it. Even if the test is motivated by the determination to disprove it. I will ask you to try it, for I know you will not disprove it. That this wonderful consciousness of yours is the ultimate reality, and you are free to choose the state into which you will go. But most of us have chosen, but unwisely. Not a thing is wrong with the state. The state is all right, but it's giving effect to it that makes it either right or wrong as far as we are concerned. Now, our theory, I assure you, has not been suddenly conjured out of nowhere, and the stories I told you here for the last 7 years, the case histories I have recorded in my last book, The Power of Awareness, were not fabricated to fit this theory. But this theory was slowly built up by careful observation of the facts. For when someone would come into my world and describe their world to me, they revealed the being that they really are. When I asked the simple question, what do you want? And they named it, and they told me they really want it with all their heart. And then I asked them how would they see the same world had they realized their objective. Looking at the same world, they began to describe it differently. I said, now, that is the description you must make of the world. You must weave that into your mind. For in so doing, you move into that state where that world becomes real relative to that state. So if you now know the world you would see had you achieved your aim, then that is the world you must begin to see in the mind's eye. And if in time that state becomes an objective fact, then the theory as you see was not made to fit it. It formed itself by a careful observation of these facts. So, if I could repeat that time and time again, and each time by moving this permanent I into the desired state and let it occupy that state long enough to make it natural, at the moment of naturalness, the state becomes visibly objective to them, then we have a true theory. For it does explain the phenomena of life. So here in this series, we have brought you many revelations. One that I want to stress throughout the entire series is the wide difference between thinking from an end and thinking of an end. Right now, I am thinking from Los Angeles. Every part of this world, if I should think of it, I'm thinking of it. He's in Los Angeles, thinking from Los Angeles. Every other part of the world is thinking of it. As I just mentioned, I was in San Diego and in Santa Barbara and in San Clemente and in Oceanside and in San Juan Capistrano, and in Ventura. All of those names are places I'm thinking of as I describe them to you. I am not from those, I am speaking of those. Currently, in and around Long Beach, that's where I am speaking to you from. Everything is relative to me from where I am. I can only speak of those places from here. But I am thinking from Los Angeles, and the difference between the two, as you can see, one is reality and one is a dream not yet made real. Because imagination is the central figure of the Bible, and no power in the world can stop his travel. He can go into any mansion and there abide. There is no power on the face of the earth that can stop me now from imagining myself into the state desired. So I begin to think from it. As I begin to think from it, all former states vanish, and that is the great Son of God that can move into any mansion of his Father's house and there occupy. If he ever goes in and occupies it, then I shall be there in the flesh also. So in this Father's house of mine are the unnumbered states that are already existent, and I, discovering who the Son really is, and only the Son can go into these mansions, so discovering the Son to be my own imagination, I will dwell in imagination as though I dwell in the flesh. And then living in that state, I will take my body also, that I may confirm that state. For dwelling in the state long enough clothes the state in flesh. So here, every one of us, if you will accept it, can from this day on be as free as the wind. It's entirely up to you to choose what mansion you will enter. For you are the only architect of your sufferings or your good fortune. You are the only architect of your sufferings or your good fortune. There's no power outside that caused anything to happen to you. It's simply your choice, as I said earlier, your unwise choice. Very, 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 very big and most important point of studying and learning any metaphysical attitude that says you're creating your own reality, like the Seth material says. The Seth material is very popular for those 5 words. You create your own reality. Neville, very, very popular and very, very famous for saying, your imagination creates reality. Simple, simple, simple. If you're going to get involved in any of these kind of manifestation concepts, you're going to have to come across this idea that nothing's happening to you. No power outside that has caused anything to happen to you. It's simply your choice. That has to be the pill that's swallowed. That's the red pill. You can't go any deeper and wield at will consciously what kind of reality you want to experience and the freedom that's included with it unless you absorb that concept. That concept is the most. If you're on that side of accepting the concept and you don't know whether you should or not, I promise you, it's worth every ounce of it. It's worth every iota of understanding and completely accepting that concept, because it is true. You chose your birth, you chose your parents, you choose your life, you choose everything. You choose everything. No one's doing it to you. You choose everything. 1 finger's pointing away, 3 fingers pointing back at yourself. If you're ever in a position where you're pointing a finger at people, it's because you're pointing at yourself. Everything is you pushed out. You are choosing everything. It's a big, big hump right there in this kind of study, this kind of material. Now, if you're on this side of, you've already accepted it, then now you can get on with it. You can get on with wielding your imagination and creating anything you want to experience. You want health? Great. You want wealth? Great. You want marriage and family and love? Great. Freedom? Great. Even greater. More freedom. It all really starts with knowing that you are not a victim. It's not happening to you, it's happening by you, and it's coming from you. Knowing who you are now and not being ashamed to lay claim to this bold assumption that Christ in man is man's imagination, then you will stop calling on some external force for help. As the prophets say, why stand we here calling on God for help and not on ourselves in whom he dwells as our imagination? So why call elsewhere when he dwells here, where I stand as my imagination? For is there any power to stop me from imagining that I am the man I want to be? So that I actually clothe it with a feeling of reality? If I can so clothe this imagined state with all the vivid sensitiveness of reality, then I will ultimately actually clothe it in flesh. For that's the law, from within out. I really love when Neville would talk about insurance, and he'd talk about it's such a farce. It's like, what are you trying to insure? If you're the one who created the diamonds and the jewelry and the gold you have in your safe or in your safe place or whatever it is that you created in your world, what are you trying to pay somebody else to ensure that how is it going to be lost when you created it in the first place? But you brought it into your world, you objectified it in your reality through your imagination, and then you're supposed to pay somebody else to safeguard it? It makes completely no sense. Yet that's the way of a lot of insecurity. How do you pay someone else to secure your imagination? And why would you? It's yours. It's right there. It couldn't be any closer. It makes no sense, that whole concept of trying to cover something you're creating from your imagination. I love when he talked about those, handful of times. It's like a real slap. It's like a wake-up slap. If you are bold enough to take it, you will free yourself today. If you are still timid, may I suggest you go back and read the 7th chapter of the book of Mark, where you must then still keep alive the traditions of men and ignore the law of God. So men wash the cups and wash the pots and pay all outside obeisance to things known as the traditions of men, that they may be seen of men and be considered holy. But I bring, said he, the law of God, and no man seems to hear it. Know ye not that ye are the temple of the living God, and the Spirit of God dwelleth in you? Have you ever heard these words, Christ in you is the hope of glory? Not some Christ without, but Christ in you is. But if we aren't bold enough to lay claim to it, for we are told, ye have the mind of Christ, not a mind that you are going to earn in time to come. You have it now, so lay claim to it and begin to exercise this giant of the mind that is called the Son of God in the Bible, and you will see who your Savior really is. Now, may I give you a few of his titles, for these are all taken from the Bible. He is called the Redeemer. He is called the Savior. He is called the Passover. He is called the Second Man. He is called the Desire of all nations. Now take it and see how it fits your wonderful imagination. The man you don't know to exist, that second man, is the imaginative you. The one you hold captive by accepting the evidence of sense and only that which reason dictates. If you will now free the second man, you will see how he is the Passover. He can pass now from this present state into any desired state in the world, for no power can stop you from dwelling in imagination where you desire to dwell. So placing yourself there You begin to think from it and not constantly starve yourself by thinking of it. So I will go and prepare it, and preparing it, I will dwell in it and begin to think from it. Now I assure you, unnumbered similar stories have been told me in the past year by those who took me at my word and began to awaken Christ within. He had been asleep while the senses dictated their every step, and then completely denying the evidence of sense and boldly imagining themselves to be what they desired to be, they have found their Savior. And what man, the world could turn them back to the traditions of man. They are free from all traditions of men, and so no man can appear before them and call himself the intermediary before man and God. So they are turned from all intermediaries, having found the only Redeemer, and the Redeemer is the only intermediary between man and God. So then you know that at any time any time that you exercise your imagination lovingly on behalf of another, you are literally mediating God to man. And what does that mean? Imagining lovingly on behalf of another, it means to see them the way in the place they want to be seen. What do they want? What do they really want? What is their dream? What do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to be when you're done with school? What do you want to be now? What would make you happiest to be? Then it's my responsibility to imagine you there as that. That's imagining lovingly for you. And as you do that for another, now you're mediating God to man. And that means everyone around you, everyone in your awareness. It's not hard to imagine lovingly for a homeless person when their sign says exactly what they want. It's not hard. It doesn't cost you anything. It costs you seconds, 10 seconds. Literally in 10 seconds, you can imagine lovingly, wonderfully, for somebody standing on a corner. And now, anybody else in your world, they're telling you, they're talking, they're telling you where they're socially, financially, intellectually, where they are spiritually. You can hear it. So you can ask the simple question, so what is it you really want? Boom. Now you have the fuel for the fire. You know what they want? Imagine lovingly them in that place. See it real here. Completed. Done. You're celebrating with them. Don't forget the high five and the hug. So you don't need any of the traditions of men and keep them alive, hoping that you will be considered by some invisible power, some holy being. So let us turn back and freshen up again this word, which has been so abused, which now is your imagination, which people without defining call the subconscious, as though it was some appendage. People go around speaking of my subconscious mind or my unconscious mind, not knowing what they are referring to. Well, this fabulous series of mental states is your imagination. And may I tell you, it has form, it has structure, just as real as the visible, objective world, that the inner world is a world of reality. Call it by any name. I call it my wonderful imagination. And it assumes the form of all that I accept and consent to as true. Remember, consent, very important word. I call it my wonderful imagination, and it assumes the form of all that I accept and consent to. Accept and consent to as true. It actually assumes the form of the sum total of all of my beliefs, and my beliefs need not be true. They need not come near the truth. My beliefs could be prejudices. They could be superstitions. It doesn't care. It will take all the stripes of men and wear them. So it will assume the form of the sum total of all that man consents to in this world. and then mold the outer world in harmony with the inner arrangement of itself. Therefore, to change the outer world, I must modify or change in some way, alter the structure of the inner or second man, the second man being my imagination. So I set myself to observe myself and to watch how my imagination works. And here is something that will interest you. I observe it always moves according to habit. That is a being of habit. And so if I get into the habit of thinking the unlovely thoughts, it becomes very natural. So I listen only to that which is critical of another. I listen only to that which is not full of praise, that which judges harshly. And so according to habit, it moves along these pathways. Now, if I don't like the outer world and I really believe it is caused by the structure of the inner or second man, I then must change his likeness, change his form, by observing how I react to all the unlovely and how I am not interested in the praise of another, and then begin to feed my sheep, begin to change my thoughts, my feelings, my moods concerning others. And as I begin to change my reactions to people, I find I am changing the structure of the Son of God. It is so incredible. You will never feel like a kid in a playground. It will just be like a beautiful, beautiful memory the more you imagine lovingly for others and complete strangers. And you see the angelic form in them. Beautiful, beautiful opening that happens when you imagine lovingly for all. It is profound. Over the last couple of days, over this last weekend, today's Monday, we met some cool people. And my wife, she, as my teacher said about her when she did her numerology, she said, there's a quality she has, and she said she never meets a stranger. And it really is true. And we had our dog with us, our little dog Ziggy, and he was, he's a magnet for people because they just love, you know how dogs are. And so my wife had the dog, and nobody's a stranger anyway in the first place, but now with the dog, now we're talking to more people, and now they want this kind of dog, and etc. Or some people that have a dog like ours, and just a lot of wonderful meetings and communications and conversations, and just it's so wonderful when you're loving imaginatively of anybody else, of the wonder behind the person. Just love. It changes you completely. And I mean completely. I die daily is allowing the past to go away and bring in the new present. And when you're imagining lovingly for another, all you have is a new now that is most exuberant and beautiful and amazing. And the people that are in it are just even more amazing. Just incredible. Every single person we interacted with. You just get into this new high. Let me repeat this sentence because it's profound. I don't know how long. He's like Seth. He's got the ability of Seth to make these sentences that aren't run-on, but that are just long. Now, I'm going to repeat the whole thing because it's good. Now, if I don't like the outer world, and I really believe it is caused by the structure of the inner or second man, I then must change his likeness, change his form by observing how I react to all the unlovely and how I am not interested in the praise of another, and then begin to feed my sheep, begin to change my thoughts, my feelings, my moods concerning others. And as I begin to change my reactions to people, I find I am changing the structure of the Son of God. And then I automatically produce corresponding changes in my outer world. It is so beautiful. I can't hardly describe it to you. You have to do it. You must do it. Just imagine lovingly for others. Listen to your thoughts. Listen to your criticisms. Don't allow those to take hold. Immediately think the opposite. If a criticism comes in, opposite. Just go to the opposite. I have to put this on record. We had a debacle with the room. We were in a room Friday night, which was we were in a room Friday night, which had a canteen above. And in that place, while we were trying to take a nap in the afternoon, because we love naps, it sounded like people were above there because I think it was there's tables and a major U-shaped bar in there. And it seemed like we were right below the end of the bar indoor tables. And it sounded to us like people were just going across the room and grabbing a stool or a chair and dragging it over to that side and then not wanting it there and then dragging it all the way back. So the debacle was, the first night was there was a lot of noise from above. And ultimately, at a certain time, the place closes at 10 or whenever their business peters out. But, we had to stay up. We were literally aware and awake until they finished, then we could finish. And that was the funny part of it because we took it in stride. We just liked the room and we liked the place and we liked the food above. It was really delicious. And then the second night was too full. We were only going to stay one night. So then the second night was full. So we were like, okay, well, let's find a place around locally. So we found a place and it seemed like an older place. And we're like, yeah, let's go for it. What the heck? It was almost full. So we grabbed one of the last rooms. And we have our doggy with us, of course. So we had to consider that. And so we get in that room. It's right off the traffic. So the traffic going by is nice and profound. And people with their engines and sirens every couple hours with some sirens going by. And then it was a lot of broken sleep, which I got a lot of profound visions. When your sleep is broken up, you can get some really good either out of body or lucid experiences. When you come in and out of sleep, you can get a lot of good stuff. So I had some, binaural beats and things on, and I was getting some amazing stuff that morning as we were staying the night there. But my wife wasn't getting easy sleep, and so it was not fun for her. But there's the view she started to voice that she was really, and it was in the very, very negative, and I understood. So I'm like, I had to turn it around because I had to say, okay, so this place has kind of a vintage quality to it because the windows are thin. It had a lot of a less than the previous hotel. But I, being on the positive only, would say things like, okay, it's what did I say at first? I didn't say vintage. I said another word. I said something else, and then we go out to eat. We go out to eat breakfast. I think it was lunch actually, but the next morning and the next day. So then we're looking up. I said, look up that place. It seems like it's old because it was very old. And we says, I'm thinking 40s. I'm thinking the original structure has to be 30s or 40s. And looking around in there, I mean, a lot of the features were like ancient, by today's standards, because they remodel hotels every 5 or 10 years, it seems like. But this place had an original location at the south end of this city that when the 5 freeway came in to go down towards Camp Pendleton, they took this hotel, moved it, and it's a 16-room building. Literally, they moved it down the road off the path of the freeway, and it stayed in town. And it has all this wonderful history. You read the history, and all the Marines used to go there, and they used to stay there back in the, it would be 40s and 50s. So you had a lot of the military types would frequent the hotel, and the owners were nice to them, and the owner had this feature where you donated $5, he'd give it to this Wounded Warrior Fund, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I found, before we learned all that, I kept looking at the very positive side of this place. I thought this place has history. And then when we found it, I'm like, see, there it is. It was a really interesting article from 2010 about that hotel. It had all this wonderful history, and it was like, wow. I mean, you kind of want to stay there after you read that. And here we were having, one of us, not a great experience, and one of us was just looking at the bright side. I was taking the positive, loving approach no matter what. I mean, what are you going to do? You're already in the place. So either you can go around being grumpy or not, the opposite, which I was trying to take hold of. And I noticed it finally influenced my wife. She finally calmed down off of that grumpy, critical approach. And then we both, when we went to eat lunch the next day, breakfast, lunch, we both looked at the history and we were both really changed from it. from understanding the originality of the place. And that was yesterday at lunch. We got home yesterday afternoon. And then today I get a text from my wife, and it says, they want me to give a review how we liked our stay at the hotel. And I says, hey, let's just get some 40s hats and put them on. She has an interesting bucket hat that's on my banner on my YouTube page. And I'll get me a 40s hat. I think I might have one because I have a lot of costume stuff. And then I said, let's take a picture and say we loved it. That, ultimately, I'm telling you this story for this specific reason. That would be imagining lovingly. You take what you have, you make it good. You transform it into good. They want to know what we thought of the stay? Let's put on some 40s hats and say, simply, we loved it. I mean, that is really literally, that's even revising at the same time. And this is how you do it. You go from being in opposition to your experience to being one in flow of your experience. And then it elevates your experience. And then all the next experiences that are coming into your life that you are creating anyway, all just take on an elevated presence consistently. You keep on elevating and consistently ascending. You're only here to ascend. It's your only objective is ascend, ascend, ascend. Go from this part of life that you might not like this one thing and you want to change it. You're single, not happy, not married, you want to be married. You ascend into the married or relationship. From the relationship, you ascend into the married. From the married into the family, the kids. From the kids and the husband or wife into the house. You're always ascending. You do it optimistically. You do it lovingly. And it becomes a smooth sailing path. It doesn't have obstruction. It doesn't have a fight. We were laughing quite a bit at lunch yesterday when we read the article, so we did come out of it. I hope unscathed. I just give you the example for a fine example of how to apply this. If you really like it and you are bold enough to take it, I promise you a world that is undreamed of by our wise men, for even sleep will no longer be the unconscious that it is to the majority of people in the world. That sleep becomes only a doorway into the world where this real you, the second man, really lives and moves and has its being. It is a dimensionally larger world, and you enter it quickly in meditation or night after night in sleep, and you will find opportunities that would dwarf the wildest dream of men here. So I ask you to really believe it and try in the short interval of 4 weeks while we are here to so prove it that you can tell me of the things that have happened to you by putting into practice this power of awareness. Learn to become aware at any moment of time of your fulfilled desire. Assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled and learn to become intensely aware of the state fulfilled that you may look upon your world and describe it relative to your fulfilled desire. And learn then to sustain that mood. You will find in time through the habitual motion of your inner you after a little while, because it always travels according to habit. It will move through habit into the feeling of the wish fulfilled. And the moment it is a natural wearing to itself, it starts to change the outer world to reflect the inner change of your mind. Now, I hope you will take it, but there is no power in the world that can compel you to take it. You are as free as the wind to take it or not to take it. If you would rather persist in the belief that your Savior lived years ago and died for you, and through his death, external to yourself, you are saved, you are entitled to believe it. As I told you earlier, because the inner you is molded in harmony with the sum total of all of your beliefs, you will continue to have visible proof of the truth of that belief. For you will find millions believing with you, and you will believe that the numbers make it right. And so you will, contribute to the whole vast traditions of men. If you want to come out and be a part and find your Savior where you will only find him within yourself by setting your imagination to observe itself, you must come to the same conclusion. that this ultimate reality that men call God, that the ancients defined as I am, is your own wonderful consciousness, and that it in action, or the Son, or Christ Jesus, is your imagination. And then, having discovered, you start to feed the sheep. And you will stop, as of now, this walking of your Savior in the mud. As my hotel mini vacation, basically we went out of town to celebrate my birthday, which was yesterday. And you can take your Savior in the mud wherever you go, or you can just be, and you're just, I don't even know if an actual bee, I just thought of the literal meaning of the word bee, B-E-E. Do they know where they're flying? Is there a flight plan at all? And if I think about this last couple days, there was no real flight plan. I mean, there was an initial flight plan, going to a room, being in this town, enjoying the good eats and the good shore of the beach, walking the dog, pier. Does a bee have a flight plan? Is the fragrance its flight plan? Is that fragrance that it seeks for then to get the nectar that it seeks to bring to the hive, to pollinate, all these features that a bee is? I can't imagine there's a flight plan per se. There's only an is. I'm sure it smells, it must smell. Something brings it to the color. There has to be a smell involved, I would think, but maybe it's the color, I don't know, of the flowers. Either way, it's floating. And that's what the last couple of days felt like in my experience. It felt like a going from one wonderful experience to the next. It was all joyful, wonderful. Now I see my time is up, and so at this moment, I'll take the chair and let us all join in exercising our imagination lovingly on behalf of another. Simply imagine that they are talking to you and they are telling you what they wish they could tell you, and you listen as though you heard. And then you will put into practice that first verse of the 5th chapter of the book of Ephesians. Be ye imitators of God as dear children. For how would I imitate my Father? He calls things that are not now seen as though they were, and the unseen become seen. That is the way my Father called things into being, and I am called upon to be an imitator of my Father as a dear child. For now I will call the imaginary voice. I will listen as though I heard what I want to hear. I will look as though I am seeing what I want to see. And if I persist in my listening and my looking, I will then be imitating my Father as a dear child, and He will not fool me. He will call into flesh, into objective reality, that which I have assumed, that I have heard, and I have seen. So let us go into the silence and imagine lovingly, on behalf of another. You have that person in mind now. It's instant. They come right away. The squeaky wheel gets the grease. I have a friend I am imagining lovingly for. Bring yours into mind. Hear the good news. They're telling you now. It's wonderful new news. It's in your ears. You are happy and you are saying, congratulations, I'm so happy for you. Isn't it wonderful? Now comes the hug, the high five. It's so cool. You see their smile. They see your confirming smile. Nice. Very good. It's that simple. It's that short. Doesn't take a lot of time. Neville Goddard lecture, The Power of Awareness, came out obviously after the book because he mentioned the book in the lecture. And we're going to see you in the next one.